Radio silence. Do you have a favorite radio station? What are your favorite times to listen to that station? To illustrate the possibility that God speaks to us, but we don't always hear, I once conducted an exercise with a traditional radio receiver for my daughter Kristen's 7th grade Sunday school class. My wife Sherry and I had often taught this group during the previous 10 years, allowing us the opportunity to understand the unique personalities of each student and recognize the spirit of the overall group. With this familiarity in mind, we often contemplated creative ways to convey the lesson for the day. Before reviewing the radio on that particular day, I asked the class if they thought God might be trying to speak to them right now. They responded by casually shrugging their shoulders. This class ordinarily had no fear of voicing their opinion, whether in agreement or disagreement with something I said. I would frequently provoke them with false statements just to hear them exclaim the truth. If I asked them, "Did Jesus really turn water into wine and heal a blind man by the side of the road?" they would have replied confidently, "Yes." If I stated that we can only pray when in church, they would have responded, "No, you can pray anywhere." But for some reason, the question about God speaking to us left them speechless. Conceivably, these teenagers struggled with the question for the same reason that adults struggle with it. Maybe they knew in their hearts that it was true, but couldn't remember any credible person who claimed this truth. Instead, perhaps they had a recollection of someone branded as an object of ridicule for claiming to hear God speak, and feared becoming an outcast. Or perhaps each of these young people experienced an internal conflict in which he or she strongly doubted the possibility of God speaking to us, but did not want to look like a heretic, in case it was true. Only God knows what occupied their hearts and minds at that moment, but I knew one certainty: I had their attention. So I asked again, "Do you think God is saying something to you right now?" Silence. Then I asked if they thought there might be radio waves in our classroom from Z100, a popular radio station in New York. Their ears perked up, and a few raised their eyebrows in restrained interest as I rephrased the question. Is it possible that Z100 is in the room right now, but we don't have the right equipment to hear it? As they pondered that question, I turned on a radio, already tuned to Z100, and a hit song came blasting out, eliciting cheers from the class. After a few moments of listening, I turned off the radio and returned to the original question, in a modified form. Is it possible that God is speaking to us, but we just don't know how to listen? Just as we couldn't hear Z100 because we didn't have a radio that was plugged in, turned on, and tuned in to that specific frequency, maybe we can't hear God because we are not tuned in to Him. My generation and younger generations might overlook the marvel of the technology of radio broadcasts and receivers because these innovations have existed throughout our lives. We may take for granted that these commonplace devices contain complex instruments that have the power to capture distant signals, yet offer a simple interface that allows us to easily select which signal to hear. On the other end, at each radio station, a programmer or disc jockey selects music, or a host initiates a monologue or dialogue with the audience. Meanwhile, the radio engineers employ technology to generate and monitor a signal at a specific frequency modulation or amplitude modulation that they broadcast to a geographic range whose size depends on the strength of the transmitter and the topography of the land. Imagine sitting in the shoes of the radio talk show host, talking into a microphone to an unseen audience, depending on the engineers to ensure a signal is delivered, but unsure of whether anyone actually tunes in and listens. Radio stations broadcast their signals to us 24/7 and hope that we listen so that they can satisfy their advertisers or so that they can deliver an important message to us. We determine whether we attempt to hear those signals or not. First, we must have the right type of equipment: AM radios, FM radios, satellite receivers, or in some cases, a personal computer with an internet service. Second, we have to turn the machine on, adjust the receiver to the right frequency, or push the right button or enter the right website address. Finally, we have to turn the volume loud enough to drown out other sounds. But even then, we may not submit our full attention to the broadcast unless the music or message fully engages us. Imagine the messages that God might have prepared and broadcast to us when we were not tuned into Him. He is the host, programmer, engineer, antenna, and signal, all rolled into one. His content is truth, and He created the receivers. Unlike the ordinary radio host, our extraordinary God knows if we tune in or not, but allows us the free will to make that decision.